My daughter demanded our $5 million beach house. I sold it next morning, plus the one she thought was hers. You have 12 hours to get out. That's what my daughter told me. She stood in the house I built with my own hands, her eyes as cold as ice, telling me to leave. She had no idea her poor father, the man she thought was fading into dementia, was secretly worth $125 million. I just smiled, took my wife's picture, and walked away. Her eviction notice arrived the next morning. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know just how far this goes. Now, let's get back to it. I was standing in the living room. The October sun slanted through the big bay windows, throwing light across the oak floors I'd planked and sanded myself 40 years ago. This house, our place in Rehoboth Beach, had always been my sanctuary. But today, the air felt wrong. The familiar smell of salt and sea was choked out by something else, something cold and foreign. I was holding the only frame I kept on the mantel. It was Diane, my late wife, back in the summer of '85. She was laughing, a smile so bright it outshone the sun, her hair caught in the ocean breeze. It's been 2 years since I lost her, but the ache is still as sharp as newly broken glass. I ran my rough thumb over the glass, trying to pull some warmth from the memory. Wham! The front door flew open, slamming against the drywall. I flinched, almost dropping the frame. It was Alicia, my daughter. And she wasn't alone. Her husband, Chad, trailed in behind her. Chad, the smooth hedge fund manager who always looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine, didn't even look at me. He had his phone pressed to his ear, his voice booming with that special brand of East Coast arrogance. Exactly 7,000 square feet, direct oceanfront view, he said loud enough for me to hear. It's $1 million view. It'll be the perfect venue for the company gala at the end of the month. The clients will go insane. Just lock it in. He walked right past me like I was a piece of furniture, heading straight for the floor-to-ceiling windows to admire his new prize. Alicia, her face a mask of cold impatience, marched right up to me. No, hello. No, how are you, Dad? Dad, she snapped, her voice sharp. Don't clutter the place. Before I could even process it, she snatched the picture of Diane right out of my hands. My fingers were still closing around the frame, and it made a dry scraping sound as she pulled it free. We need the space. She tossed the frame onto a nearby armchair, face down, a simple, brutal act of disrespect. I felt my blood begin to heat up, a slow burn that had been smoldering for a long, long time. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice even. Alicia, you didn't call. I don't have time to call, she shot back. She ran a finger along the dining room table. It's dusty. You can't even keep the place clean anymore. Chad finally hung up his phone and turned around, smiling at Alicia, but not at me. It's fine, baby. I talked to the event planners. They're sending a deep clean crew and some designers on Monday. I just stood there. Designers? Event planners? What the hell are you two talking about? Alicia let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind you use on a child who just isn't getting it. Dad, listen. I'll make this simple. We're here to take over. Take over. That's right, she said, crossing her arms. Chad needs this house for a major company event at the end of the month. His reputation depends on it. Chad chimed in, his tone patronizing. Nathaniel, these are major clients. We're talking tens of millions in new contracts. We can't host them at some cheap golf club. This place, he glanced around again, it has potential. And you, Alicia continued, are moving in with Julian. I already talked to him. Your old room is still there. It'll be good for you. Someone can keep an eye on you. The way she said, keep an eye on you, made my stomach turn, like I was some senile old fool who couldn't be trusted, not the man who built every single thing she had. "No," I said. My voice was low and firm. Alicia's eyebrow shot up. "No. This is your mother's house. This is our house. I am not going anywhere." Silence filled the room. Chad looked at me, then at Alicia, and then he laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Listen, Nathaniel," he said, stepping closer to me. He was a little taller, but he had no weight to him, he was just an empty suit. "You're 68 years old. You don't use a $5 million asset. It's a waste. It's just sitting here collecting dust, just like you. We need to build relationships, to create value." Value. I stared at him. She doesn't even call it our home, I thought. Just, the house, the asset. I remembered 40 years ago. Me and Diane, just kids in our 20s, scraping together every penny we had to buy this piece of land. Rehoboth wasn't this fancy resort town back then. It was a place where a black family like ours could come and not get stared out of town. Guys like Chad wouldn't have even looked at this neighborhood. I drove every nail in this house myself. I poured the foundation. I laid the roof shingles. My sweat and Diane's love are in the very bones of this place. And now this punk, who was born with a silver spoon and never did a hard day's work, was standing in my house talking to me about value. "You can both leave," I said again, my voice like steel. "I am not leaving." Alicia stared at me. The annoyance was gone. Now her eyes were just cold. "Dad," she said, her voice flat. "I'm not asking." She walked over to her expensive designer handbag, pulled out a thick sheath of papers, and threw it down on the coffee table. "This," she announced, "is an emergency petition for conservatorship. I filed it with the court this morning." My stomach clenched. "Conservatorship?" "That's right," Chad chimed in, his smug grin returning. "You've been showing signs, Dad. You forgot to pay the electric bill last month." "I forgot because I was in Zurich for 3 weeks closing a deal." "You've been refusing medical care," Alicia added. "I refused because I don't need the useless, expensive back surgery you two have been pushing on me just to get an insurance payout. And," Alicia looked me dead in the eye, "you're showing clear signs of dementia. The court will see that you are no longer competent to manage your own affairs." I almost laughed. "Competent? You think a court will believe that nonsense?" "Oh, they'll believe it," Alicia said, her voice dripping with venom. "Especially when both of your children testify to it." That hit me like a punch to the gut. "Julian." I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it was almost blinding. I hit Julian's number. It rang once, twice. Then he picked up. "Dad." His voice was weak, watery. "Julian, what is this? What has your sister done?" There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. "Dad. Alicia said it's for the best. She said you're becoming a danger to yourself. She paid off my credit cards, Dad. My debt." I didn't need to hear any more. I hung up. Julian, my son, the sensitive one, the artist I'd paid for a master's degree he never used. The son who was $8,000 in debt from bad investments and a lifestyle he couldn't afford. And Alicia, she'd bought him. She'd bought my son for the price of a mid-range Audi. I looked up from my phone. Alicia was checking her watch, a gold Cartier that I'd bought her for her 30th birthday. "I don't want to make this ugly in court, Dad," she said. "Just give us the keys. We're being generous. We'll give you 12 hours to get out. Pack what you need. The cleaning crew will be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow to throw out the rest of this junk." Chad stepped forward and clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be friendly, but felt like a threat. "Time to go, Nathaniel. You can't afford this fight. Hell, you can barely afford to heat this place in the winter. I looked at them. At my daughter, her face twisted with greed. At her husband, his eyes gleaming with triumph. They thought they had me. They thought they had won. And in that moment, all the anger just evaporated. It left behind something cold and hard and perfectly clear. I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was just a small lift at the corners of my mouth. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a smile that made Chad's hand flinch away from my shoulder. It was a smile that made Alicia take a small, involuntary step back. They clearly didn't know what to do with it. This wasn't in their plan. The senile old man wasn't supposed to smile. I looked at them. My children who had just tried to strip me of my home, my dignity, and my mind. "All right," I said. My voice was quiet. Alicia blinked. "What?" "All right," I repeated. "You win. I'll go." Now they looked confused. This was too easy. But their greed quickly overshadowed their suspicion. Chad's smug grin returned. Alicia let out a breath of relief, her concerned daughter mask slipping back into place. "It's for the best, Dad. You'll see." "I just need one thing," I said. I walked past them, picked up the picture of Diane from the armchair where Alicia had tossed it, and tucked it carefully into the pocket of my flannel shirt. "I'll be out by morning." I walked out the front door, leaving them standing in the middle of my living room, already measuring for new furniture. I heard Alicia laugh as I closed the door, a high, sharp sound of victory. I got into my truck, my 2010 Ford F-150, the one with 200,000 miles on it and a dent in the fender. The truck they saw was just another piece of proof that I was a poor old man who couldn't manage. They saw the old truck. They saw the flannel shirt. They saw the 68-year-old black man who they thought they could just push aside. They didn't see the man who had sold an AI logistics software startup for $80 million 6 months ago. They didn't see the man who had spent the last 20 years quietly becoming one of the most successful angel investors in the tech sector. They didn't see the man whose net worth was, as of this morning, $125 million. They saw poor Dad. Good, I thought as I turned the key and the old engine rumbled to life. I didn't drive to Julian's apartment. I didn't drive to a cheap motel. I drove to Dulles International Airport. I walked past the screaming families and the long check-in lines right into the first-class lounge. I ordered a neat whiskey, sat down in a leather chair, and pulled out my phone. I dialed one number. My lawyer, my wealth manager, the man who knew where every single penny was. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Price, I take it this isn't a social call." "Henderson," I said, my voice calm. "Code Diane." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. He knew what that meant. "Sir, are you certain?" "Execute it," I said. "Sell the Rehoboth Beach house. I want it sold by tomorrow morning. Cash buyer. I don't care about the price. I care about the speed. I want it closed before 9 a.m. Can you do that? I have a standing offer from a developer in New York who's been trying to get that property for years. He'll pay cash." "Consider it done," Henderson said, "all business." "Good," I said. "One more thing. That Tyson's Corner penthouse, the one Alicia and Chad think they own." "Ah, yes, the Nate Holdings LLC property. What about it?" "Start the proceedings," I said, taking a sip of my whiskey. "Take it back." The morning after. At 8:05 the next morning, my plane was just lifting off the runway at Dulles. And right on schedule, Alicia's white Range Rover and Chad's black Tesla pulled into the driveway of the Rehoboth house. They weren't alone. A big white van marked "Executive Cleaners" pulled in right behind them. They were ready to scrub my entire life away. I've had a long time to picture this scene, based on what my lawyer Henderson pieced together later. Alicia stepped out of her car like she was royalty, wearing oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my first car. She looked, I'm sure, impatient, annoyed that she even had to be there. Chad was already on his phone barking orders before his feet even hit the gravel driveway. Yeah, I want the whole living room gutted. That old fireplace, I want it torn out by noon. We'll put in a wine wall. I can just hear him saying it. They walked up to the front porch, the porch I'd sat on with Diane for 40 years, watching the storms roll in. They were high on their victory. They thought they'd won. They thought the old man was defeated. Ugh, I bet he left a huge mess, Alicia would have snapped, wrinkling her nose. He probably sat here and cried all night. It's so pathetic. Chad, of course, would have laughed right along with her. He's probably curled up on Julian's tiny futon right now, wondering what hit him. I'm not leaving. Famous last words from a senile old fool. He brought this on himself, Alicia would have snapped. It's just sad. That's the problem with his generation, baby, Chad would tell her, putting his arm around her. They don't understand progress. This isn't a memory. This is an asset. And now it's our asset. They got to the front door. Alicia turned to the foreman of the cleaning crew. All right, listen up. I want this place sterile by 5 o'clock. Everything inside goes. Furniture, rugs, curtains, all of it. Bag it up. We'll donate the junk later. I want empty. This was it. Their moment of triumph. Chad, with his smug, arrogant grin, pulled out the key I had given him years ago. He was ready to make his grand entrance to officially take possession of my house. He pushed the key into the lock, ready to turn it and begin his new reign. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. Nothing. He jammed it in again harder, his face turning red. What the hell, he muttered. Did the old man already change the locks? That's senile. Just break the door down, Chad. Alicia snapped, her patience gone. The cleaners are on the clock. But before Chad could throw his shoulder against the solid oak door, a sound made them both freeze. It was the quiet crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A long, black, impossibly shiny Bentley Continental purred silently up the drive, coming to a stop right behind Chad's Tesla, blocking him in. The cleaning crew stopped what they were doing, all eyes on the car. This was not part of the plan. Alicia let out an annoyed huff. Great. More interruptions. Who is this? The driver's door of the Bentley opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored blue suit stepped out. He looked sharp, expensive, and utterly calm. This was Mark, the real estate agent Henderson had arranged. He walked around the front of the car and opened the rear passenger door. A couple stepped out. They were in their late 50s, radiating the kind of effortless wealth that Chad tried so hard to imitate. The woman wore a cashmere coat, and the man had a relaxed, confident smile. They completely ignored Alicia, Chad, and the cleaning van. Instead, they looked up at the house, their faces full of appreciation. It really is spectacular, Mark, the woman said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. The online photos didn't do it justice. I told you it was a one-of-a-kind property, Mark said, smiling. This was too much for Alicia. This was her house, her victory. Who were these people acting like they belonged here? She marched down the steps, her heels digging into the grass. Excuse me, she called out, her voice high and sharp. Can I help you? This is private property. Mark, the agent, turned to her. His smile was polite, professional, and completely unbothered. Good morning. You must be Alicia. Alicia stopped. How do you know my name? Who are you? I'm Mark, he said, extending a hand, which Alicia ignored. We're just here for the final walkthrough. The new owners wanted to see the place one more time before their designers arrive. Chad had come up behind Alicia, puffing out his chest. Walk through. Walk through for what? We're the owners. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're trespassing. Mark's polite smile didn't waver for a second. He looked down at the tablet he was holding. Ah, I see the confusion. You must be mistaken. You aren't the owners. Alicia let out a laugh, a sound like cracking ice. Mistaken? You're mistaken. This is our house. It belonged to my father, Nathaniel Price, but he's no longer, well, he's no longer in charge. We are now. Get off our property. Ah, Mark said, tapping his screen. Nathaniel Price. Yes, the former owner. That one word hit them like a freight train. It hung in the salty air, sharp and undeniable. Alicia's face went pale. What? What did you just say, former? Chad stepped in. Listen, buddy, I don't know what kind of scam you're pulling. There's no scam, sir, Mark said, his voice still perfectly level. Mr. Nathaniel Price sold the property this morning at 7:30 a.m. Dead silence. The cleaning crew looked at each other. Alicia just stared, her mouth half open. That's impossible. Chad sputtered, finally finding his voice. That's a lie. He couldn't. We're his legal guardians. He can't sell it. Alicia shrieked, her voice cracking. We filed a petition. He's mentally incompetent. The sale isn't valid. Mark finally dropped the polite smile. His expression turned cold. Ma'am, I don't know anything about a petition. What I do know is that I am standing here with Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, the new legal owners of this $5 million property. The sale was closed an hour ago. It was an all-cash offer, signed and executed by Mr. Price and his legal counsel from one of the top law firms in D.C. It is 100% valid. Now, Mark continued, turning to the new owners. If you'll follow me, I'll show you the master suite. No. Alicia screamed. She lunged forward, trying to get past Mark to the front door. This is my house. Get out. Get out. Chad grabbed her, but he was just as stunned. She's right. This is illegal. We'll sue you. We'll sue the old man, the new owner. Mr. Harrison finally spoke. He looked at Chad with a mixture of pity and disgust. Son, I don't know who you are, but you're making a fool of yourself. We just bought this house. Now, I suggest you take your friends, he gestured to the cleaning crew, and your daughter and leave before I call the police for trespassing. Mark, the agent, stepped up to the front door. He pulled a brand new key out of his pocket. He slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The door swung open. Welcome home, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, Mark said, ignoring the two statues of fury and disbelief crumbling on the lawn behind him. Alicia just stood there, frozen. Her face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending rage. What? What did you just do? Get out of my house. Mark didn't even look at her. He held the door open for the new owners. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, please, after you. Watch your step. As the couple walked past, completely ignoring my daughter, Chad seemed to finally snap out of his stupor. He lunged forward, not at Mark, but at the new owner. Hey, you can't just walk in here. I'm telling you, this sale is a fake. Mr. Harrison stopped and turned. He was a man who clearly was not used to being yelled at. He looked Chad up and down with utter contempt. Young man, I have already been more patient than you deserve. I have a legally executed deed of sale. You are the one trespassing. Mark, call the police. That's not necessary, Mark said, stepping calmly between Chad and the new owners. He looked directly at Chad, his voice dropping all pretense of politeness. "Sir, your problem is not with Mr. Harrison. Your problem is with Mr. Nathaniel Price. And frankly, your problem is also with me if you continue to harass my clients." "We'll see about that," Chad yelled, his voice cracking. He was sweating now, his expensive suit looking wrinkled. "This is fraud. We will have this entire sale invalidated by noon. The owner, Nathaniel Price, is mentally incompetent. He's senile. We filed a conservatorship petition yesterday." Mark actually laughed, a single, sharp, dismissive sound. "A petition? You filed a piece of paper? A piece of paper that hasn't even seen the inside of a courtroom? That's what you're banking on?" "It's the truth," Alicia shrieked, finding her voice. "He has dementia. He doesn't know what he's doing. You tricked him. You preyed on an old, sick man." Mark shook his head, looking almost bored. "Ma'am, I have been a high-end real estate broker in this state for 20 years. I do not trick people. I met with Mr. Nathaniel Price last night at Dulles Airport. He was sharp, focused, and completely in command of his faculties. He was also, I might add, accompanied by Mr. Henderson of the Henderson, Price and Gable law firm, one of the most powerful attorneys in Washington, D.C. The color drained from Chad's face. He knew that name. Everyone in D.C. finance knew that name. That's not possible," Chad stammered. "Oh, it's very possible," Mark continued, enjoying this. "Now, Mr. Price signed all transfer documents. Mr. Henderson notarized them, and Mr. Harrison's bank wired the full $4.5 million in cash, which was confirmed received by Mr. Price's holding company at 7:31 a.m. this morning. This property," he slapped the solid oak door frame, "is sold. It is done. It is, as you put it, invalidated, but for you, not for them." Alicia just stared at him, her brain trying to process the words. $4.5 million, she whispered. He sold it for. He gave away $500,000. He didn't give it away, ma'am, Mark said. He prioritized speed. He wanted a fast, clean, all-cash closing, and he got it. Mark then turned to the foreman of the cleaning crew who was watching the whole show. "Sir, I'm afraid your services will not be required. The new owners have their own contractors. You'll need to send your invoice to them," he gestured at Alicia and Chad. That was the final blow. The foreman's face hardened. "What? She told me this was a corporate account." "I'm sure she did," Mark said. "Now, Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, I am officially, on behalf of the new owners, telling you to vacate this private property immediately. If you are not in your vehicles in the next 60 seconds, I will be calling the Rehoboth police and having you removed for trespassing." Alicia finally broke. She let out a sound, a wild animal sound of pure rage and loss. "No. No. I'm calling him. I'm calling my father. He can't do this to me. He can't." She ripped her phone out of her purse, her fingers stabbing at the screen. She put it to her ear. I know what she heard, the click and then the automated voice. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available. Please try again later." I was, at that moment, 30,000 feet over the Atlantic, sipping a glass of champagne. He turned off his phone. She screamed at Chad as if it was his fault. As they stood there, defeated on the lawn of a house that was no longer theirs, I allowed myself a little extra piece of satisfaction. You see, I didn't just sell the house to any cash buyer. Henderson and I had been very specific. The man who had just walked into my house, Mr. Harrison, was Robert Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Capital, the one business rival that Chad truly, pathologically hated. The man who had outbid him on 3 major deals in the last year. Chad hadn't just lost a $5 million asset. He had just personally handed it over to his greatest enemy. I took another sip of champagne. That, I thought, was what you call value. Good luck with the company party, Chad. I'm sure Mr. Harrison will send you an invitation. I could picture it so clearly. It was almost like I was there, standing right beside them, instead of 30,000 feet over the Atlantic. My daughter, Alicia, her perfectly composed mask shattered into a million pieces. Her face, which I used to adore, now twisted in a blotchy red mask of pure fury. I can see her stabbing at the screen of her phone, dialing my number again and again and again. "Answer me, you old bastard. Answer me." And hearing nothing but the click and the polite automated voice telling her the subscriber was unavailable. She turns on Chad, her eyes wild, her voice a shriek. He turned off his phone. He's gone. He turned off his phone. And Chad, oh, Chad. He would just be standing there, paralyzed. This wasn't in his playbook. He's a bully who only knows how to punch down at people he thinks are weaker than him. But he just got hit by a freight train from an angle he never saw coming. He's watching the new owners, his rival owners, walk through the house he was measuring for a wine wall just 10 minutes ago. He's watching the cleaning crew pack up their vans, the foreman walking over to him, hand outstretched, demanding payment for their time. This is the moment the real panic sets in. The moment they both realize this wasn't just a setback. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an execution. Alicia would be hysterical, probably calling Julian next, screaming into the phone, "Did you know? Did you know he was doing this? He sold the house." And Julian, my weak, terrified son, would just be babbling on the other end, as clueless as they were. They're standing on the lawn, defeated, humiliated in front of strangers, humiliated in front of the working men they'd hired to throw my life in a dumpster, and most importantly, humiliated in front of the new owner. And that's the part one savored the most as I looked out my window at the clouds. You see, I didn't just sell the house to any cash buyer. Henderson and I had been very, very specific. The man who had just walked into my house, the man who was at that very moment probably admiring the ocean view from the master bedroom. That was Robert Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Capital. Chad doesn't just dislike Robert Harrison, he hates him. He hates him with a deep, pathetic professional jealousy. Harrison had outbid him on 3 major deals in the last year, making Chad look like a fool in the boardroom. Chad sees Harrison as his ultimate rival, the man he measures his entire pathetic life against. And I, poor senile Nathaniel Price, had just sold my $5 million house to his greatest enemy. For $500,000 less than it was worth, just to make sure it happened so fast Chad couldn't even blink. Alicia wanted to build relationships. Chad wanted to host a gala to impress his clients. Well, I'm sure Robert Harrison will be happy to host them. I'm sure he'll send Chad an invitation to the party. Maybe he'll even hire him to park the cars. The flight attendant leaned over. "More champagne, Mr. Price." I smiled a real smile this time. "Yes, thank you. I think I will." The first part of the plan was done. Now for Phase 2. Phase 2, the drive home. The drive from Rehoboth Beach back to Tyson's Corner, Virginia is about 2.5 hours. I, of course, was well into my second glass of champagne by then, somewhere over the coast of Newfoundland. But I can picture every single minute of that drive for them. It wouldn't have been a quiet drive. It would have been a silent drive, the kind of oppressive, heavy silence that is so much louder than shouting. The initial hot shock of their defeat on the lawn would have cooled into a cold, simmering, terrified rage. Chad would have been in his black Tesla, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His mind wouldn't just be on the $5 million house. It would be on Robert Harrison, on the clients he'd bragged to, on the company gala that was now a smoking crater in his career. He would be calculating the cost of this humiliation. And he would be blaming Alicia. And Alicia, she'd be following right behind him in her white Range Rover, the one I paid the down payment for as a wedding gift. She'd still be trying my number over and over, her thumb stabbing at my contact name. She'd be leaving me voicemails that I knew, even without listening, would be a spectacular spiral from, "Dad, you have to call me. This is a terrible mistake," to, "You old bastard, I will destroy you for this." Then, somewhere around Annapolis, just as they were approaching the Bay Bridge, a little orange light would have flickered to life on her dashboard, the low fuel warning. She'd have yanked the wheel, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic without signaling, and pulling into a massive, brightly lit highway gas station. She'd get out, slamming the car door so hard the whole vehicle shook. She wouldn't even look at the price per gallon. She'd just grab the pump, snatch her Amex Platinum card from her wallet, and jam it into the slot. The screen would flash, "Transaction failed. Please see cashier." I can just see her face, the confusion, the flash of pure irritation. "Stupid machine," she would have muttered, pulling the card out and jamming it back in harder this time. "Card declined." "Unbelievable," she'd shriek to no one in particular. She would storm into the convenience store, probably cutting in front of a family trying to buy sodas. She'd slap the card down on the counter. "Your pump on number 7 isn't working," she'd snap at the cashier. The cashier, a teenage kid just trying to get through his shift, would sigh. He'd take the card, run it. "Sorry, ma'am. It's declined." "That's impossible." Alicia would say, her voice rising, attracting stares. "That's a platinum card. There is no limit. Run it again." "I did," the kid would say, holding his hands up. "It's declined." "Fine," she'd huff, digging in her expensive purse. She'd pull out another card, a Visa signature. "Try this one." He'd run it. Declined. Her face would go pale. This isn't just annoyance anymore. This is cold, sharp panic. She'd try a third card, her bank debit card. Declined. "What is wrong with you?" She'd probably start screaming at the poor kid. "What's going on? The bank must have frozen my accounts. It's a mistake. They must have flagged it for fraud." Chad would have pulled up next to her pump, annoyed, wondering what was taking so long. He'd have to come inside, roll his eyes at her as if she was the incompetent one, and pay for her gas with his own card. He'd sneer at her as they walked back to the cars. "Can't even manage your own finances, Alicia." They'd get back in their cars, they wouldn't talk about it. But that silent 2-hour drive just became the longest, most terrifying drive of their lives. The anger was still there, but it was being joined by something new, fear. Cold, creeping fear. The house was just the beginning, and they were only just starting to realize it. They got back to their penthouse apartment in Tyson's Corner just as the sun was starting to set. They were exhausted, humiliated, and now terrified. That little incident at the gas station had planted a seed of pure dread in my daughter's heart. But the real harvest was yet to come. They walked into their gleaming modern apartment, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire DC metro area. The one I paid for. The silence that had filled their cars now filled their home. Chad probably threw his keys onto the marble countertop, the sound echoing in the massive empty space. Alicia likely collapsed onto one of her white leather sofas, kicking off her expensive shoes. And then Chad's phone would have buzzed. An angry text, then another. It was the foreman from the cleaning crew. "Where is my payment? I have a crew to pay. You owe me $800 for the travel fee and minimum booking." Chad would have sworn under his breath. He was a man who hated loose ends, especially loose ends that cost him money. "Useless old man," he probably muttered, blaming me for the cleaning bill. "Now I've got to pay these idiots." He'd pull out his laptop, sit at his glass desk, and log into his online banking. He'd find the invoice from the cleaning company and click, "Pay bill." He'd type in his account information, the one he used for all his business expenses. He'd hit enter. A little red box would pop up on his screen, "Transaction failed. Insufficient funds." Chad would have stared at it. Insufficient? What? He'd checked the balance. The account, which should have had at least $50,000 in it, now read $122.50. He'd have felt a jolt of pure electric panic. No, 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 no. He'd switched to another account, a joint savings account he shared with Alicia. Balance, $0. Alicia, he'd yell, his voice suddenly high and thin. Get over here now. Alicia would have run over, her face pale. What is it? What's wrong? The accounts. Look. He'd point at the screen. She'd see the zeros. What is that? It's a mistake. It has to be a bank error. Call them. Chad would be frantically clicking, logging into another portal, his main portal, the one that managed his quarterly consulting fee. I could have told him not to bother, I thought, as I signaled the flight attendant for water. You see, Chad thinks he's a brilliant investment manager. What he never bothered to find out is that his largest client, the one that paid him a consulting fee of $20,000 every quarter, wasn't some anonymous offshore fund. It was Nate Holdings LLC, my holding company. And at 9 a.m. this morning, right after the house sale closed, I'd had Henderson not just cancel the next payment, but claw back the last two, citing gross non-performance. Chad's screen would have loaded. His consulting account balance, minus $40,000. He would have made a sound, a dry, choking gasp. It's gone. He took it all. He took the money back. What are you talking about? Alicia would be screaming now. What about my trust? The trust from Mom. He can't touch that, it's mine. Oh, my sweet, foolish daughter. That was the part one was proudest of. She'd log into her own bank account, the one where her inheritance landed on the first of every month, the $15,000 allowance she'd been living on since Diane passed away. Alicia always called it Mom's money. She believed Diane had left her a private trust. She never read the paperwork. She was too arrogant, too entitled to read the fine print. She just saw the money and assumed it was her right. She never realized that Diane and I built our wealth together as a team. And when she passed, all our assets, all $125 million, reverted to me. The Diane Price Trust Fund that paid Alicia's bills. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a discretionary fund managed by a single trustee, me. And this morning, I had simply discretionarily turned off the tap. Alicia's account page would load. Current balance, $429.19. Next deposit, pending cancellation. She wouldn't have screamed. This was beyond screaming. This was the cold, silent, crushing realization that the entire foundation of her life, her apartment, her car, her clothes, her identity, was built on sand. And the tide had just come in. He cut me off, she'd whisper, her hands shaking. He cut me off. He took all of it. Chad would be in a full-blown panic, pacing the apartment, running his hands through his hair. The house, the accounts, he's liquidating. He's running. That old bastard is trying to hide the money before the conservatorship hearing. We have to stop him. We have to call the lawyers. We have to freeze his assets. Alicia would say, her whisper turning into a desperate yell. What about Julian? Chad suddenly said, his eyes wide. He must have left Julian something. He always loved him more. Call him. Call your brother. He must have money. Dad, Alicia said, before catching herself. This is the best way. Find out what he knows. Alicia would grab her phone, her hands trembling so badly she could barely dial. Her last desperate hope. Her weak, easily controlled little brother. He had to have something. He just had to. The climax. It would have taken Julian about 30 minutes to speed from his cheap apartment in Arlington to their luxury penthouse in Tysons. 30 minutes of his phone vibrating non-stop with increasingly hysterical texts from Alicia. When he finally burst through the apartment door, he would have been breathless, his face already pale with fear. He would have seen them immediately, Alicia, her makeup smeared, her face blotchy and red, Chad vibrating with a rage so intense he looked like he might explode. What? What's wrong? Julian would stammer, looking between them. What did he give you? Alicia would lunge at him, maybe even grabbing the front of his shirt. Dad, what did he leave for you? He cut us off. All of it. But what about you? He always loved you. Julian's eyes would go wide, his face somehow getting even paler. Leave me. His voice would be a terrified squeak. He didn't leave me anything. He took it. What are you talking about? Chad would snarl, his voice low and dangerous. My bank account, Julian would stammer, holding up his own phone with a trembling hand. I owed him, the $80,000 for my debts. He called it in. He emptied my checking account, my savings. I have nothing. I'm negative $32,000. He cut me off, too. That was the sound of the last matchstick of hope being extinguished. Julian, their weak link, their ace in the hole, was in the exact same boat they were. Alicia would just stare at the phone screen, at the negative balance. Then she'd slowly look up at her brother. Her eyes, which had been desperate, now turned to pure, undiluted acid. She'd hiss, her voice quiet and venomous. This is your fault. What? Julian would say, stumbling back. My fault? How is this my fault? You were supposed to handle him, she'd scream, shoving him hard. You were the good son. You were supposed to keep him calm. You agreed to the petition, but you were too weak. You couldn't even do that, right? I tried. Julian would be crying now. You said he was sick. You said he was losing his mind. You didn't say he was this. Shut up, both of you. Chad would roar, silencing the room. He'd advance on Julian, jabbing a finger in his chest. You knew, didn't you? You knew he had this kind of money. What? No, Chad, I swear. I had no idea. Liar. Chad would shove him back. You played us. You played your own sister. You let us do the dirty work, let us be the bad guys, thinking you could swoop in later, be the loyal son, and get him to give it all to you. No. I'm broke. Look at me. You sold us out. Alicia would scream, joining Chad, pushing her brother again. Just like you sold him out for 80 grand. You are worthless. You've always been worthless. The three of them, the united front that was going to take down their father, were circling each other in that multi-million-dollar apartment. A pack of rabid animals screaming, shoving, clawing at each other. The alliance hadn't just broken. It had detonated. They were rats in a trap. And they were so busy tearing each other apart, they wouldn't have heard the sound at the door. A polite, firm knock, knock, knock. The screaming match was at its peak. They were so lost in their own greed and betrayal, so consumed by their panic, that at first they wouldn't have even registered the sound. Knock. Knock. A polite, firm, official sound at the front door. It would have cut through their shouting like a razor. They'd freeze. Their red, angry faces would instantly turn pale with a new kind of fear. Who was this? The police? Had the bank sent someone? Knock. Knock, knock, louder this time, more insistent. Chad, probably trying to re-establish some dominance, would have stormed to the door, yanking it open. What do you want? He'd bark. He wouldn't have seen a policeman. He wouldn't have seen a banker. He would have seen a tall, thin man in a perfectly pressed, nondescript gray suit. He was holding a leather portfolio. He looked like an accountant or a mid-level corporate lawyer. He looked completely, utterly, and terrifyingly impassive. His eyes were blank. The man wouldn't even look at Chad. His gaze would drift past him into the apartment, landing on my daughter. "Are you Alicia Price Donovan?" the man would ask. His voice was flat, with no emotion at all. Alicia, her voice still hoarse from screaming, would step forward. Yes. Who are you? What is this?" The man in the suit wouldn't answer. He'd just open his portfolio, pull out a thick envelope, and hold it out to her. "I'm here to serve you this notice, ma'am." Alicia would just stare at the envelope. "Serve me what? What are you talking about?" I didn't do anything. I was instructed to deliver this to you personally," the man would say. "You have been officially served." Chad would have snatched the envelope from the man's hand. "We're not accepting anything. Get out." "My job is done," the man in the suit would say, not moving. "I would advise you to read that document very, very carefully. Good evening." He would turn, walk to the elevator, and press the button, his back to them. Chad would slam the door. He'd look at Alicia, then at the envelope. His hands would be shaking. This was a new threat, a legal threat, and it was outside his understanding. What is this? What did he do now? He'd rip the envelope open. Julian would be standing there, crying silently. Alicia would be frozen, watching her husband's face. Chad would pull out the document. It was thick, covered in legal jargon. He'd scan it, his eyes darting back and forth. He'd read the first paragraph, and then his face, which was already pale, would turn the color of ash. "Alicia," he'd whisper. It wouldn't even sound like his voice. "What?" she'd say. "What is it, Chad? What did he do?" Chad would look up from the paper, his eyes completely vacant with a horror that eclipsed everything else. This is an eviction notice." "An eviction?" Alicia would laugh, a short, hysterical bark. That's ridiculous. He can't evict us. We own this apartment. He can't." "No," Chad would say, his voice trembling as he read from the paper. "It says, notice to quit to tenants Alicia Price Donovan and Chad Donovan. From the legal owner, Nate Holdings LLC." Alicia's world would stop. Nate Holdings? What? What is that? That's his company. The one from the bank. "It says," Chad would continue, his voice breaking, "the property owner, Nate Holdings LLC, hereby terminates your at-will tenancy, per the terms of your rental agreement." Rental agreement? Alicia would finally scream, snatching the paper from him. "What rental agreement? We bought this place. Dad gave it to us. It was our wedding present." She'd scan the pages, her eyes flying over the legal text, until she saw the attached copy. A copy of a document she had signed 5 years ago, right after her honeymoon. A document she had been too excited, too arrogant, and too busy to read. A document she thought was just boring tax paperwork for her wedding gift. A document that was, in fact, a 10-page rental agreement. And right at the bottom, her signature, and Chad's signature. This isn't real," she'd whisper, the paper falling from her fingers. He tricked us." "It says," Julian would say, picking up the paper, his voice dead. "Tenants must vacate the premises within 24 hours. 24 hours. The man in the suit was gone. The apartment was silent. The fight was over. They had lost the beach house. They had lost their money. And now they had just been told they were homeless. The paper trail. Rental agreement." Alicia's voice wasn't just a scream. It was a sound that broke the sound barrier of her own reality. It was the shriek of a mind rejecting a fact it could not process. Chad didn't say anything. He was breathing like a man who had just been pulled from icy water. He was no longer angry. He was no longer arrogant. He was just terrified. He stumbled, then ran to the elegant mahogany desk in the corner of the room. He ripped open the bottom drawer, pulling out hanging files, throwing papers everywhere. "Chad, what are you doing?" Alicia cried, following him. "Call the police. This is fraud. The papers. The wedding papers, the closing documents, they're here. I know they're here." Chad was muttering, his voice shaking. "Ah, the closing documents. My flight was beginning its descent into Florence. I closed my eyes and pictured those documents so clearly. I remember when they found this apartment 5 years ago, right after the wedding. They were insufferable." "Oh, Dad, it's perfect," Alicia had gushed over the phone. "It's a $4 million penthouse in Tyson's. It's us." Chad, of course, had gotten on the line. He tried to sound like a big-shot financier. "Nathaniel, the financials are tricky, but I've got a plan. If you can co-sign and we structure the loan through my fund, we can leverage the asset." He was trying to get me to pay for his $4 million apartment without him having to put a single dollar down. It was almost impressive in its audacity. So, I made him a counteroffer. "Son, that sounds complicated," I'd said in my most folksy, poor dad voice. "All those banks, all those variable rates. Why don't we keep it simple? I'll just buy it. Cash. It's cleaner. We'll set up an LLC, for tax purposes. It'll be my wedding gift to you both." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. They were stunned. $4 million cash. They were so blinded by the number, so blinded by their own greed, that they didn't ask the right questions. They didn't ask who exactly would be the owner of that LLC. A week later, we were in my lawyer's office, Henderson's office. Henderson, in his boring gray suit, slid a stack of papers across the conference table. "All right, Alicia, Chad, this is the standard formation for the LLC and the tenancy paperwork for your records. Just sign here, here, and here." They were giddy, drunk on the idea of their new life. They saw Nate Holdings LLC at the top of the page and assumed it was a company I had given them. They saw Tyson's penthouse and their names. They didn't read the fine print. They never do. They didn't see that they were signing as managing tenants, not owners. They didn't see the monthly lease payment of $100. They probably thought it was just some legal fee, a quirk in the tax code. For 5 years, they'd paid that $100 a month, believing it was a management fee for their company. They had no idea they were paying rent. They didn't read the at-will tenancy clause, the clause that stated the owner, Nate Holdings LLC, could terminate their lease with 24 hours written notice for any reason, or no reason at all. They were so arrogant, so sure of their place in the world. They just signed. They signed their own death warrant. "Found it." Chad roared back in the penthouse. He pulled a thick file labeled "Penthouse Deed" from the back of the drawer. He ripped it open, scattering papers. "See," he yelled at Alicia, his voice cracking with a desperate, false triumph. "See, it's right here." His voice trailed off. He was staring at the top page. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a title. It was a 20-page document with a cover sheet. And on that cover sheet, in bold, clear type, were the words "residential lease agreement." "No," he whispered. "No, this is the wrong file." He frantically dug through the other papers, but they were all the same. Utility bills, insurance forms, and the lease. Always the lease. Alicia snatched the document from his hand. Her eyes wide and frantic scanned the page. She didn't understand the legal jargon, but she understood the words. She understood landlord. She understood tenant. She understood monthly rent. Her eyes flew to the last page, to the signature block. She saw her own beautiful, flowing signature, Alicia Price Donovan, right above the line that read tenant. She saw Chad's sharp, arrogant signature, Chad Donovan, right above the line that read tenant. And then she saw mine, Nathaniel Price, above the only line that mattered, landlord authorized representative, Nate Holdings LLC. She made a sound, a small choking sound, as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. The paper fluttered from her fingers. She finally understood the $100 fee every month. It was rent. The company Nate Holdings. It wasn't their company. It was his. The apartment she was standing in, the apartment she had hosted parties in, the apartment she had built her entire identity around, was never hers. She hadn't been given a gift. She had been allowed to stay. She didn't faint. She didn't scream. She just collapsed. Her legs gave out. She crumpled to the expensive Italian marble floor, her body folding in on itself. Julian, who had been standing by the door, frozen in terror, slowly bent down and picked up the other document, the eviction notice, the one the man in the suit had delivered. He read the last line out loud, his voice a dead monotone in the silent, tomb-like room. All tenants and all personal property must be removed from the premises within 24 hours. They were in a $4 million apartment they didn't own, with no money, no credit, and no home. And they had one day. The reckoning. 1 week later, I wasn't in Tuscany anymore. I had flown back to Washington, D.C. for this one final meeting. But I wasn't at my home. I wasn't at their apartment. I was in the conference room of Mr. Henderson's law firm on the 50th floor, in an office of dark mahogany and floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the entire National Mall. You could see the Washington Monument clear as day. This was a room built for one purpose, to demonstrate power. I was sitting at the head of the long polished table, sipping a hot black coffee. I wasn't wearing my old flannel. I was wearing a custom-tailored suit. I was, for the first time in their lives, letting them see the other me. The me that Chad, in his wildest dreams, wished he could be. The door opened. Henderson's assistant, a sharp young woman, showed them in. They looked diminished. Chad came in first, but the arrogant swagger was gone. His expensive suit was wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it. His face was puffy, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He saw me, and his eyes flashed with pure, undiluted hatred. But it was the hatred of a cornered animal, not a predator. Julian shuffled in next. He just looked broken, pale, shaky, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. He wouldn't look at me, he just stared at his own feet as he found a chair as far away from me as possible. And then Alicia, my daughter, my beautiful, confident daughter. She was almost unrecognizable. Her expensive hair was tied back in a messy, careless bun. She wore no makeup. Her clothes, though still clearly designer, were rumpled and stained. She looked hollowed out. The fire was gone. She just looked tired, and for the first time, she looked old. They sat down at the opposite end of the table, the three of them huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. They had spent the last week living out of a mid-level hotel, burning through the last of their actual cash. They had tried to hire a lawyer, but no lawyer in D.C. would take their case. Not when they had no money, and especially not when they found out they would be going up against Henderson. Henderson himself walked in carrying a thick leather binder. He sat down at my right hand, placed the binder on the table with a solid, definitive thud, and looked at the three of them over the rim of his glasses. "Thank you for coming," Henderson said, his voice cold and formal. Chad tried to puff himself up. We're here to discuss the illegal seizure of." Henderson held up one hand. And Chad stopped talking instantly. "You are here," Henderson said, "because my client, Mr. Price, was generous enough to grant you this meeting. You are not here to make demands. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to listen. I took another sip of my coffee. The room was silent. The final act was about to begin. The silence in that room was heavier than gold. Henderson's words just hung in the air, absolute and final. You are here to listen. That's what broke her. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a hitch in her breath, a tremor that ran through her shoulders. Alicia, my daughter, who had stood in my house and given me 12 hours to get out, began to cry. It wasn't the fake, theatrical crying she used to get her way. It was an ugly, broken, desperate sound, the sound of a person who has truly, completely hit the bottom. Her head fell into her hands, and her shoulders shook. It was his idea, she whispered through her sobs. Chad's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide. What did you say? Alicia lifted her head, her face a mess of tears and smeared mascara. She pointed a trembling finger directly at her husband. Him, she screamed, her voice cracking. It was all him. Dad, please. You have to believe me. It was all Chad. The conservatorship, the petition, that was his idea. He told me you were sick. He told me you were losing your mind. He said we had to protect the assets from yourself. Chad looked like she had just stabbed him. You lying bee. He did. Alicia shrieked, jumping to her feet. He told me you'd be grateful. He told me Julian agreed to it. He pushed me. He said I was being too emotional and not seeing the big picture. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to help. It was, I had to admit, a spectacular performance. A masterpiece of self-preservation. The rat cornered had decided to eat the other rat. Chad was sputtering. He looked from his wife to me to Henderson. He was being dismantled piece by his own partner. His rage finally boiled over, his fear momentarily forgotten. You will not do this, Alicia, he roared, slamming his palms down on the polished table. The sound echoed in the quiet room. He stood up, trying to regain his master of the universe posture. He puffed out his chest. He looked at me. This is coercion, he yelled, his voice shaking but loud. We will not be intimidated. We are going to sue you. He pointed that trembling finger right at me. We are going to sue him. He gestured wildly at Henderson. And this entire corrupt firm. We're suing you for fraud, for theft, for emotional distress. You can't just take everything. You can't just throw people out of their home. We have rights. This is illegal. He was just grasping at straws, throwing legal-sounding words at the wall, hoping one would stick. He'd forgotten the lease. He'd forgotten the law. He'd forgotten everything except his own wounded pride. He was pathetic. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Then slowly, I turned my gaze to Henderson. I let him finish his little tantrum. I let him spit and yell and make his empty threats. I let him exhaust his own rage. And when he was finally done, breathing hard, his fingers still trembling in the air, Henderson spoke. He didn't sigh. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Chad with a kind of clinical, cold pity. Sue us, Henderson said, his voice quiet, cutting through the room. Mr. Donovan, please, I invite you to sue us. I would genuinely love to see you stand up in a court of law and try to explain this. He slowly opened the thick leather binder that had been sitting in front of him. He turned it around and slid it with one smooth motion down the polished mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of Chad. It was their own petition. The emergency petition for conservatorship. You can't use that, Chad stammered. I can, Henderson said. And I will. This is your signature, is it not? On a sworn statement filed with the court. Henderson tapped a section of the document. Let's start with your claim here that my client, Mr. Price, was forgetting to pay his bills due to cognitive decline. He then slid a second, much thinner folder on top of the first. These are my client's bank statements from Zurich. They confirm that, during the exact week you claimed he was forgetting his electric bill, he was in fact personally presiding over the $80 million liquidation of his AI logistics firm. You call it dementia. The banking world calls it a brilliant closing. A court of law, Henderson's voice dropped, calls it perjury. Alicia made a small, choked sound. Julian flinched. Or perhaps, Henderson continued, you prefer to discuss your other sworn statement, the one claiming he was refusing vital medical care. He slid another document onto the pile. This is a signed, notarized affidavit from Dr. Benjamin Benari, my client's actual and very highly regarded physician. It states that the back surgery you were pushing was, and I quote, medically unnecessary, elective, and potentially harmful. He also notes that your preferred surgeon just so happens to be your college roommate. He leaned forward, dropping all pretense of politeness. Filing a fraudulent petition, Mr. Donovan, in an attempt to seize control of an estate is not a civil matter. It is a felony in this jurisdiction. It carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison for both of you. Chad just stared. He was trapped. He knew it. But Henderson wasn't finished. But that, Henderson said, his voice almost a whisper, isn't even your biggest problem today. He closed the binder. He looked at Chad not as a lawyer, but as an executioner. At my client's request, we've spent the last week conducting let's call it a forensic review of your professional life, your hedge fund, Donovan Capital. This is it, I thought. This is what $125 million really is. It's not the suit or the plane or the view from this office. It's gravity. It's the ability to hire the best, most ruthless forensic accountants in the world. The kind of people who can find a single dirty dollar hidden in a mountain of clean ones. The kind of people who can trace a single whispered lie back to its source. And Chad was nothing but lies. It's a private fund, Chad stammered, his face turning a sickly greenish white. You have no right. We have every right once you commit fraud against our client, Henderson snapped. And we found some fascinating irregularities, the way you leverage unverified assets, the creative way you report your quarterly earnings, the consulting fees, it's all very compelling. Henderson steepled his fingers. He looked Chad dead in the eye. I haven't made any calls yet, he said, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. I thought I'd wait, see how this meeting went. But I have a very thick, very detailed file on my desk, and I was just thinking, one phone call, one single anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission along with this file, and your career isn't just over, Mr. Donovan. Your life as you know it is. That was the word. The SEC. That was the bullet. Chad didn't yell. He didn't protest. He didn't even breathe. It was as if someone had reached into his chest and simply pulled the plug. The color, the anger, the arrogance, it all just drained out of him, leaving a pale, trembling, empty shell. He staggered back, his hand fumbling for the back of his chair. And he didn't just sit down, he collapsed into it. He wasn't a master of the universe. He wasn't a predator. He was just a failed criminal. Chad was a broken man staring at the table, his world reduced to a single word, SEC. Henderson had dismantled him piece by legal piece. But Alicia, my daughter, she was still trying. She saw her husband's collapse not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. She slid from her chair, her knees hitting the expensive carpet, and she actually tried to crawl the few feet to my end of the table. Dad, she sobbed, her hands clasped together like a desperate prayer. Dad, please. You see what he is? He's a criminal. He's a liar. He fooled me. He fooled all of us. Please, Dad. I'm your daughter. I'm all you have left. Don't let him ruin me, too. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I let her crawl. I watched her, this 35-year-old woman, groveling on the floor of a lawyer's office. I watched her throw her own husband, the man she had plotted with, under the bus without a second's hesitation. I waited until she was done, until her sobs subsided into whimpers. And then for the first time in that entire meeting, I spoke. My voice was quiet. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just empty. Get up, Alicia. She flinched as if I had shouted. Slowly, awkwardly, she got to her feet and stumbled back to her chair. I looked at her, really looked at her. I wasn't her poor dad anymore. I wasn't the senile old man. I was just the man she had betrayed. You are right about one thing, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. You are my daughter, and you stood in your mother's house, the house we built, the house where she died, and you tried to steal it. She opened her mouth. Dad, I continued, holding up a hand, silencing her just as Henderson had silenced Chad. You didn't just try to steal a house. You tried to steal my dignity. You tried to have me declared insane. You tried to erase me. You and your partner plotted to strip me of my home, my name, and my mind. And you did it all for money. I let the words hang in the air. Your mother, my Diane, she believed in you. She thought you were strong, but you are just greedy and you are weak. I looked at Chad, who was still staring into the void. You chose this hollow, grasping, pathetic man, and you became just like him. You are not sorry you did it, Alicia. You are just sorry you got caught. I turned my gaze. You will not receive another cent from me. Not from your mother's memory. The allowance is gone. The trust is gone. The apartment is gone. Everything is gone. You wanted to be in charge of my assets. Well, now you have none of your own. Her face crumpled. The last desperate hope she'd had, that she could cry, apologize, and charm her way back into the will, it just died. And then I turned to my son. Julian had been silent this whole time, his face buried in his hands. He was just a ghost in the room. Julian. He flinched, but he didn't look up. Look at me, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Slowly, his head rose. His face was a ruin. He was the one I had truly loved without question. He was the one I had protected. Dad, he whispered, his voice completely broken. Dad, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I cut him off, not with anger, but with a simple, cold, devastating fact. $80,000, I said. He stopped breathing. That, I said, was your price. You sold your father for $80,000. No, he cried, a real, agonizing cry. No, Dad, it wasn't like that. I was scared. The debt. I paid for your education, I said, my voice still quiet, level. I paid for the master's degree you never used. I paid for your apartments. I paid for your cars. I paid for every bad investment. I asked for nothing in return except for your love and your loyalty. I leaned forward. And when the time came, when your sister and that, I gestured to Chad, came to you with a lie, you didn't call me. You didn't defend me. You took the money. You signed the paper. You sold me. You sold your father for a stack of cash to pay off a credit card. He couldn't speak. He just broke. He dropped his head to the table and sobbed a deep, racking, truly broken sound. I looked at them. My two children, one a failed predator, the other a coward. The judgment was delivered. The room was heavy with the echo of Julian's sobs. I looked at Alicia. Her mouth was open, her face frozen in a mask of total, utter disbelief. She was still, even now, waiting for the punchline, waiting for me to laugh and say it was all a test. I looked at Chad. He was an empty shell, a man already in his own personal prison. "Henderson," I said, my voice flat. Henderson stood up. It was the signal. "Mr. Donovan, Ms. Price Donovan, this meeting is concluded. The security team in the lobby will escort you from the building." "No." Alicia finally shrieked, a desperate, animal sound. She lunged forward, trying to grab my arm across the table. "Dad, you can't. Please. I'm your daughter. I'm your—" "Get out," I said. The words weren't loud. They weren't angry, but they were final. They hit her harder than a slap. "Both of you, get out of my sight." Henderson had already opened the conference room door. Two large and impassive men in dark suits were standing there waiting. Alicia saw them, and she finally understood. It was over. The game was done. She let out a strangled, pathetic wail and stumbled back, grabbing onto Chad's arm. He moved like a puppet with its strings cut, letting her pull him out into the hallway. The heavy door clicked shut. And then there was only Julian. He was still at the table, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He was weak. He was a coward. He had betrayed me. But he was still my son. I let him cry for a full minute. I let the silence be filled only by his shame. "Julian," I said. He slowly, painfully lifted his head. His face was a wreck. "Dad, I don't know. I don't know what to do." "I know," I said. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored suit. I pulled out my personal checkbook. Not a card, a book. I wanted him to see this. I opened it. I took my pen. I wrote the date. I wrote his name, Julian Price. I wrote the amount, $10,100. I tore the check from the book. It made a sharp ripping sound in the quiet room. I slid it across the polished table. It stopped right in front of him. He stared at it, his red-rimmed eyes wide with confusion. "What? What is this?" "That," I said, "is $10,000. It is enough for you to get a bus ticket. It is enough for you to go somewhere new, rent a cheap studio apartment for 6 months, and find a job. A real job, not an internship, not an art project. A job where you sweat and you get your hands dirty." He reached for it, his hand trembling. "Dad, thank you. I promise." I put my hand flat on the check, stopping him from taking it. He looked up at me, scared. "This is not a gift," I said, my voice like iron. "This is a loan. It is the last loan you will ever get from me. You sold me for $80,000. Now you have a new debt of 10. I don't want to see you, and I don't want to hear from you until you have a way to pay me back. Every single cent." I pulled my hand away. "Go," I said. "Go learn how to be a man. Maybe it's not too late." He took the check, folded it with shaking hands, stood up, and didn't say another word. He just walked out of the room, leaving me alone. The heavy door of the conference room clicked shut. Julian was gone. Henderson, my lawyer, my ally, looked at me. He didn't smile. He simply stood, a silent question in his eyes. He had done his part. The war was over. "Thank you, Henderson," I said. My voice was steady. "For everything." He just nodded. "Nate." It was the only word he needed. He picked up the thick leather binder, the binder that held the proof, the power, the truth. And he walked out of the room, leaving me alone. I was alone. I turned from the table, away from the ghosts of my children's greed, and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. 50 stories below me, Washington, D.C. was just a map. Cars were tiny specks. People were invisible. I could see the Washington Monument, a sharp white needle pointing at a clear blue sky. I thought about the noise of the past week. The screaming, Alicia's fake, desperate sobs, Chad's empty, pathetic blustering, Julian's broken, agonizing cries. It was all gone now. There was just silence. The clean, quiet, expensive silence of this room. The silence of victory. The silence of order. My car was waiting downstairs. I didn't go back to the beach house. Robert Harrison was probably already tearing down my fireplace. And that was fine. It was never the house, it was the memory. And I was taking that with me. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't go to Julian's empty apartment. I went straight back to Dulles. Straight back to the first-class lounge. The next scene, I am not in that dark, powerful suit anymore. I'm in a comfortable cashmere sweater. I'm in seat 2A. A flight attendant with a kind smile is placing a glass of wine on my tray. Not champagne. Not this time. A deep, dark Tuscan red. I look out the window. I am 35,000 feet in the air. I'm not looking down at a city I helped build or a family I lost. I'm looking up at a brilliant, endless ocean of white clouds set against a sky so blue it hurts to look at. I am flying away from the wreckage. I am flying towards something new. My daughter, Alicia, she was right about one thing. I am 68 years old. I am an old man. She looked at me and she saw someone who was finished. She saw a poor dad. She saw an asset to be managed, a problem to be solved, a resource to be liquidated. What she forgot, what they all forgot, was the one vital lesson my Diane taught me. The lesson she lived by and the lesson she died with. Nate, she used to tell me, her hand in mine, never, ever mistake kindness for weakness. I let them be selfish. I let them be greedy. I let them be weak. And I was kind, until they mistook that kindness. Until they crossed the line. I didn't do this for revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy, empty emotion. I did this for order. They had created chaos. They had broken the fundamental rules of family, of respect, of decency. They had spit on their mother's grave. And I simply put things back in their proper place. My son is on a bus somewhere with $10,000, learning the value of a single dollar, maybe for the very first time. My daughter and her husband are in a cheap hotel, learning the value of everything else. And I am on a plane to Italy, about to learn how to live again. The books are balanced. The accounts are settled. Order is restored. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.